Mrs. Marston, and this is rules for counting significant figures. When counting significant figures, there are three types of numbers we're going to talk about. The first one is your non-zero integers. Second are going to be zeros, and there are three types of zeros we're going to look at. Leading zeros, captive zeros, and trailing zeros. And the last number will be exact numbers. Looking at non-zero integers, these are digits 1 through 9. They always count as significant figures. For example, 3,456 has 4 significant figures. You try it. 134,576 has how many significant figures? They are all non-zero integers, so all we have to do is count the numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it has 6 significant figures. Going on to our zeros. Again, our first zero is called a leading zero. These are zeros that come before digits 1 through 9. They do not count as significant figures. For example, 0.0486 only has 3 significant figures. The zeros that come before digits 4, 8, and 6 are leading zeros. They're only holding a place. Let's have you try it. 0.058 has how many significant figures? Looking, these zeros come before digits 1 through 9, so these are leading zeros. They do not count. So the only numbers that count here are the non-zero integers, 5 and 8. So it has 2 significant figures. Our next type of zero is what we call a captive zero. Captive zeros are zeros that come in between digits 1 through 9. They will always count as significant figures. For example, 16.07 has 4 significant figures. Let's have you try it. 2.0035 has how many significant figures? Again, our zeros are stuck in between digits 1 through 9, so they are captive. They will count as significant figures. We have 1, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 significant figures. Our last type of zero is a trailing zero. And these zeros come at the end of numbers after digits 1 through 9. They will only count to be significant numbers if there is a decimal place in the number. If there is no decimal place, these zeros will not be significant. For example, 9.300 has 4 significant figures. These zeros count because there is a decimal place in the number. Let's have you try it. If we have 0.34500, how many significant figures? There's a little trick here. I've thrown in your trailing zeros at the end, and those will be significant because there is a decimal point. But I've also thrown in a leading zero. This leading zero does not count. It is not significant. It's just holding a spot. So this number has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 significant figures. Our last type are what we call exact numbers. These are numbers that we use in conversions. For example, there are exactly 2.54 centimeters in 1 inch. I can add as many zeros to the end of 2.54 and there will still be equal to 1 inch. So it has an infinite amount of significant figures. This will be important in our next lesson when we deal with calculations and how to calculate significant figures with addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So let's do some practice. Here we have several numbers, and let's determine the numbers of significant figures. For our first one, 0.02, we look and see there are zeros. They are what we call leading zeros. They do not count. They're just holding a spot. So this one only has 1 significant figure. 0.020 has 2 types of zeros in it. Again, we see our leading zeros. Those ones do not count. But we have a trailing zero. And the trailing zero will count because there's a decimal point in the number. So it has 1, 2 significant figures. 501. This zero is a captive zero and always counts. So this has 1, 2, 3 significant figures. 501.0, again, captive zero in the middle is going to count. Our trailing zero is going to count also because there's a decimal point. So this one has 1, 2, 3, 4 significant figures. 5,000. Looking here, the only zeros we have are trailing zeros, and there is no decimal point. Because there is no decimal point, these zeros do not count. They are just holding a place. So there is only one significant figure. If we look at the next example, 5,000 point, that decimal point now makes those trailing zeros significant. So now there are 4 significant figures. 6,051. Again, we have a captive zero that will count, and we have trailing zeros. There is a decimal point, so those trailing zeros will count. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 significant figures. Our next one, 0.0005. All of these zeros, again, are leading zeros. They do not count. They're just holding a spot. So there is only one significant figure. Looking at our next one, 0.1020. Leading zero up front. Again, there's no numbers before it, does not count. Captive zero counts, and our trailing zero counts because there is a decimal place. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 significant figures. And our last one, 10.001. All of these zeros are captive zeros and will count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 significant figures. That ends our lesson on counting significant figures. Our next one will be dealing with the addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division of significant figures.